Hey everyone, welcome to Pagan Happy Hour. Happy Friday, everyone. Thank you for joining me. I hope you are excited for today's topic because I think it's going to be a really fun discussion. Today we are going to be talking all about Italian witchcraft. And we kind of have a difficult task ahead of us because we're going to have to unravel what are the Wiccan influences here, and then what is the Italian folk magic tradition? How do those two intermix, intertwine? So that's what we're going to be discussing today. I'll also be sharing with you some specific Italian witchcraft folk practices. So we got a lot to cover. But if you are new here, welcome. This is Pagan Happy Hour. I've been doing this for several months, every Friday at 5 p.m. Central. This is a time and a place for us pagans to get together, have a drink, and talk about a pagan or a witchy topic. So this is meant to be a two-way conversation. So I am going to be looking at the chat as we're going along, trying to bring in your thoughts and your opinions into the conversation as much as possible. And there are two ways to support the show if you do like Pagan Happy Hour and the content I create on YouTube. The best way is by becoming a patron. I have the link down below, and when you choose to support the channel, you also get immediate access to my Pagan exclusive Discord server, which is really fun. And then the other way to support the show is through Super Chats. So I'm going to be keeping a close eye on the questions and the comments as they come in through chat, but sometimes it moves so quickly and I might not catch your comment or your question. So another great way to support the show and to ensure I see your comment or question is through Super Chats, which is just the $ at the bottom of the chat where you can contribute or donate an amount, and then your question or comment pops up really big and I'll be sure to address it right away. So, how are you guys doing this week? It's been quite a busy week for me. My mom was in town for a few days. I just got my balcony garden set up. This is the first time in my adult life that I've had any outdoor space at all. I have a balcony this year, so I have about 12 to 15 pots that I am planting various vegetables in, so we'll see how that goes, but it's been a really fun week so far. So before we get into the topic at hand, let me cue the drink music and let me know in the comments what you're drinking today and where you are watching from. So let's see, I am having of course, an Italian Chianti, right? You gotta have Italian red wine for the Italian Witchcraft Happy Hour. But I'd love to hear from you guys what you're drinking tonight and where you're tuning in from. Let's see. I see people tuning in from Minnesota, Milwaukee, Maryland, North Carolina, South Carolina, West Virginia, St. Louis, Canada, Southern Illinois, the UK, South Dakota, Brazil, let's see, Massachusetts, Arizona, Utah, a lot of Americans today. A few people from the UK. Oh, and I see Kelsey, it looks like here is from Italy. So please chime in if I get anything wrong here. It'd be great to hear from some Italians. I see it looks like we have another Italian chiming in. So this should be a really fun chat. So let's jump right into it. So the first thing I should probably mention is the terminology here. So Strega just means witch in Italian, and then Stregaria means Italian witchcraft, or it just means witchcraft. So here in the States, I think people tend to use the two words interchangeably sometimes. So they often will use the word Strega to refer to the practice of Italian witchcraft or Italian folk magic as a whole. But keep that in mind that Strega just means witch in Italian. Also, the terminology is quite a bit different too, and how we connect with it here in the States and in Italy. In Italy, I believe it's still a bit of a derogatory term to call someone a strega, but here especially, the Italian Americans have kind of embraced this term and reclaimed it. I'd love to hear if there are Italians watching, if there is any negative connotation to these words still in Italy, or if likewise they're in Italy, they're trying to kind of reclaim this Italian witchcraft, this Italian folk magic and its terminology. So I'd love to hear from you Italians that might be watching as well. And I see someone mentioning in the comments here that in elementary school they read the kids' book Strega Nona, which is a popular children's book, of course, about an Italian witch. I recommend checking it out, especially if you do have young kids. Let's see. Great comments here. Just checking the comments as we go through. Okay. Let's see. I see a comment here from an Italian saying it is still considered a bad word in Italy. It's like a bad person or a woman. So definitely it looks like things have progressed, at least in terms of the reclamation of that term, more so here in America. So, there is such a growing community of Strega here in the States, and I find this very interesting. It almost seems like Stregaria is more popular or, continuing to grow here in the States among the Italian diaspora or Italian immigrants here more so than in Italy. And I'm curious to hear from you guys that might have more firsthand experience in this. But that's not just happening with Italian folk magic. That kind of tends to happen with a lot of forms of witchcraft and paganism. For example, with Norse paganism, there are a ton of Norse pagans here in the States, and it seems to be growing here much quicker than it is back in Scandinavia, for example. And another thing that kind of keeps coming up in my research about Stregaria and Strega is that it's kind of a heritage tradition among Italian families. A lot of people that I've talked to that practice Stregaria mentioned, oh, my grandma taught me this, or, this is a tradition in my specific family, or this comes from generations of practice. So it seems like there is a strong connection to the hereditary aspect or the cultural heritage aspect with Stregaria versus something like Norse paganism, where it doesn't necessarily matter if you have immigrants from Scandinavia. Which brings me an interesting question. Do you have to be of Italian descent to be a Strega? I'd like to hear your thoughts on that question. I personally have zero Italian heritage, so I am not a Strega, but I'd love to hear from you guys. Like, how important is it to have that familial connection or that heritage connection with Italy in order to consider yourself a Strega or to practice Italian witchcraft? Is that something you view as important or not important? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Let's see. I see a comment here from Hilltop Homestead who states, yes, I come from a line of women who were Strega. So yeah, there's definitely this thread of a lot of people mentioning the importance of a continuous line here. And then, yeah, so it seems like, some people are saying, yes, it should be a closed practice. Some people are saying, maybe not. So it seems a bit divided still on, who can do these folk magic traditions or who could consider themselves a Strega. Let's see. I just think it's an interesting question to ask. Of course, I don't have the answer here, and I'm not of Italian heritage, so I unfortunately don't have any familial connection when it comes to Italian witchcraft. But I did do some research, and I do find this particular path very fascinating. Let's see. Great comment here from Anita, who says, I think you have to be connected to your practice. If you want to practice witchcraft from Italy, you have to understand the history, the land, and the flora. I really like that perspective because, when I think about it, maybe me now here in Texas, it might not be appropriate for me to practice Italian folk magic. But say I moved to Italy and lived there for a few years and got familiar with the herbs, the cooking, the land, the folk traditions, then maybe it might be more appropriate because I've taken that time and that effort to learn about these essential things. So great comments there. So yeah. Now, another difficult task we have at hand is there is quite a bit of Wiccan influence when it comes to the Italian witch and witchcraft tradition here in the States. Now, this is true not just for Italian witchcraft, but British witchcraft, even Norse paganism sometimes. There's a lot of interwoven aspects connected to Wicca. Now, part of that comes from how these traditions became popularized or rediscovered, especially here in the States. Most of that happened in the 80s, 70s, maybe the 60s, where Wicca was the main neo-pagan tradition. So there's a lot of crossover and overlap when you're looking at information on Strega online or in books. You might end up reading a few things that sound pretty Wiccan and wonder, why is that, or where does that come from? And that's just because the tradition, as it kind of blossomed here in the States, was created by several individuals who were of Italian descent, but kind of immersed in this Wiccan experience and kind of tried to combine different things. But keep in mind that a lot of what you'll find in modern books about Italian witchcraft or Strega that are published, at least here in the States, probably have a lot of Wiccan stuff intermixed in there that might not be authentic to what was actually performed and practiced in Italy. So it gets kind of tricky and complex when we're thinking about how do we or how does someone practice modern Italian witchcraft, and what does that look like? So I'm going to talk about some of those early influences that really kind of established Italian witchcraft as this whole tradition, perhaps even religion, here in the States, and how that happened. But let me check your comments before I jump into it. I see several of you guys are, talking about Wicca and the popularity of Wicca, and that witchcraft in particular doesn't have to be Wiccan. That's true. Witchcraft is something that you do. It's an activity, and pretty much every culture around the world has had a version of witchcraft. You could even say, Catholic prayer is witchcraft. There are different interpretations on what witchcraft is. I personally think of it as just an intention that you are sending out into the universe to achieve a particular result. So, pretty much every country in every time period has tried that from time to time. So you don't have to be Wiccan to practice witchcraft, and there are many forms of witchcraft that are not Wiccan. Let's see. Okay, so the first person I want to talk to you guys about is Raven Grimassi, who you might have heard of if you have been studying Strega or Italian witchcraft. So he's kind of considered the founder of the Italian witchcraft tradition here in the States. He actually uses a different term. He calls it the Hereditary tradition. And he described it as kind of a modern system of Italian witchcraft. He was the son of an Italian immigrant from Naples, which brings to mind another point, which is a lot of the Italian witchcraft and folk magic traditions come from the south of Italy. So very Sicilian. But not just Sicily, all the kind of regions in the south tend to have a lot more folk practices that have been preserved than in the north. So he began teaching Italian witchcraft in around the 1980s in San Diego, California. And then he published 2 books on the topic. One is called Italian Witchcraft, and then the other one is called Hereditary Witchcraft. I do have a link to one of his books down below if you want to, read it or take a look at the reviews or something like that in case you're curious. And he was very much into the concept of hereditary witchcraft, which is something you'll find a lot from witches in like the 80s or the 70s. They were really trying to figure out, how do I establish authenticity? And at the time, one of the ways to do that was by saying, oh, I'm a hereditary witch. Now, there are hereditary witches, there are hereditary witches today. That can mean a number of different things. Usually it just means you grew up in a household where your mom or your grandma or maybe your father or grandfather practiced some form of witchcraft and passed that knowledge down. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that your witchcraft is more authentic than a non-hereditary witch, but back in the 80s especially, and before then, hereditary witchcraft was something that was used to establish authority in the witch community. This led to a lot of lies as well, as we'll see here with Raven Grimassi, who said that his practices that he was teaching in California came from a family tradition, yet he doesn't really mention anything about his family or any specific family practices. And conspiracy theory for you, apparently Leland might have encouraged him to up that hereditary witch factor in order to sell more books. Don't know that for sure, but I think it's possible. Let's see, we have our first super chat from Sarah. Thank you very much. Let's see. She says, while I love learning history, I feel that I am very eclectic and sometimes wish there was a label that encompasses everything. Do you ever feel anxiety around feeling you do not quite fit into a label? Yes, I do feel that anxiety from time to time. I wish I was able to just stick with one thing. I wish I was able to just say, oh, I'm a heathen or a Norse pagan or a Celtic pagan, but I'm a Libra and I can't make up my mind about anything. So I call myself a pagan, and over the years I've become comfortable with just using that term or that label as pagan. Sometimes I might also say I'm a witch, though I'm much more pagan than witch in my own personal practice. But yeah, it's tricky. Labels in paganism are changing, evolving, complex. So you got to just do what you're comfortable with. I just use pagan because it's the most all-encompassing, that encompasses all the traditions that we now consider of spiritualities inspired by ancient cultures. And that's what I'm all about. That's, what this channel is about. I want to research and learn about ancient practices that are often pre-Christian, but not always, that use nature as the focal point for their spirituality. So I use the term pagan, but you can use whatever you're comfortable with. But great question, and thank you very much for that super chat. Let's see. Yeah, so, I mentioned Raven Grimassi. He's probably not the best source to look at, but I just wanted to mention this because when you are doing your own research, you're going to come across his name. You're going to see a lot of books by him, a lot of people talking about him as the founder. And I wanted to kind of give you a bit of context there on who he was. And, I'm not trying to necessarily invalidate everything he wrote about, but just keep in mind that this is coming more from a Wiccan context than a Italian folk magic practice context. But unfortunately, right now, there aren't that many books on Italian witchcraft. I hope there are more, and I hope there is going to be more resources soon. So, if you are a writer and looking for a book topic, please write a book on Italian witchcraft. I do have a couple others linked down below you can check out if you are looking for more resources. But there needs to be more out there at this point. It's such a still kind of an oral tradition being passed down from mother to daughter, and someone needs to write this stuff down. So we have Raven Grimassi. Another person that you might hear about if you are doing your own research on Strega and Italian witchcraft is the American folklorist Charles Leland. He published a book called Hereditary and the Gospel of Witches, which is, again, not a super great text to be looking at. He kind of wrote this book based on this text that he believed was a genuine text used by a group of pagans in Tuscany, and this claim of his has pretty much been debunked. So, approach what you're reading about with a hefty dose of skepticism for anything you're reading about in, pagan literature, witchcraft literature. Let's see. I see another super chat here. Thank you very much. Mentioning the difficulty of hereditary witchcraft, and that it sounds a lot like when someone tells you they're part of the Native American tradition when they're referencing something paranormal or that they saw or felt. Yeah, this whole kind of hereditary witch concept, it gets into muddy water very quick. It's difficult. So I don't try and claim any type of hereditary witchcraft in my own practice. But, be cautious, because some people will say that I'm a third generation high priestess of blah, 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 and take it with a grain of salt, because a lot of times people are doing that to establish some type of authority in the community. Sometimes it's true, there are hereditary witches out there, but a lot of times, it could be bunk. So just keep that in mind. Another thing you'll find too, especially when you're looking at these earlier pagan sources about Italian witchcraft, and not just Italian witchcraft, about Celtic paganism, English folk magic, English witchcraft, Norse paganism even, you might run into texts that mention something called the witch cult hypothesis. So I've read about this. This is something that a lot of people tended to believe in, especially in the previous decades. And this was a hypothesis that there was a line from these pre-Christian pagan societies to today, that they kind of went underground when Christianity took hold, but some traditions were preserved and passed on through these lines or these covens, and that they've been, discovered, or they find some text or whatever that is this ancient pagan source. And I want to believe it. I so want to believe that that's true, but it's kind of been debunked. Now, that doesn't mean nothing has been preserved from pre-Christian pagan society. A lot has. Some in the archaeology, some in the literary sources, not as much. But you have to think about the meshing of Christianity and paganism, because when Christianity took over, it didn't eliminate paganism, it meshed with it. So now when we're looking at Italian witchcraft, and Italian witchcraft includes a lot of work with these saints, or these saint days, or certain saints. So, that isn't just necessarily Catholic, because a lot of those saints are connected to ancient pagan deities in a lot of respects, or pagan gods and goddesses were kind of transformed by the church into saints. So even though at first glance, Italian folk magic and witchcraft traditions look very Catholic, we have to keep in mind that there was a meshing of Catholicism and these pre-Christian societies. So it's never fully Christian or Catholic. Now, that does not mean there's a direct line. So this witch cult hypothesis is not true. We're not going to find texts or spells that really survived this passage of time, but we can find hints and clues. So that's just something I wanted to kind of keep in mind, because as you're going to be doing your research and reading books, you might run into people trying to say that there was this direct line. And I want to make sure you look at that in a bit more of a nuanced perspective. Let me check your comments here before we move on to the next section. Okay. Yeah, great comments. Just looking through here. Oh, I see a comment here from, let's see, Nicole, is something like that, who states, as an Italian witch, the only source I've ever respected is Italian Folk Magic by Mary Grace Fodroon. So check that one out, I haven't heard of that one, but I'll have to check that one out too. Let's see. Let's see. I see another recommendation here from Craig that there's a YouTuber by the name of Angela Symposium who's Italian and talks about Italian witchcraft. So that's another thing you can check out. Let's see. I see another Italian here chiming in. Robin states that in Sardinian folklore, you can find a figure called Araya, who is similar to Eridia. Yeah, that's interesting. So maybe Eridia does have some type of connection there. Let's see. Let's see. Great comments. And thank you all for those of you that are chiming in, sharing your own perspective on Italian witchcraft. Yeah. So now when it comes to deities, likewise, it's very complex here. Now, usually you don't even need deities for witchcraft. Witchcraft can include deities, but it doesn't need to. So in Italian witchcraft, you have this amalgamation of, things that don't include deities and some things that do. Now, the Italian witchcraft stuff that you'll find that's been influenced by Wicca will mention like a, horned god or a moon goddess, very Wiccan, and then also like similar holidays and rituals, even performing these rituals sky-clad. So you'll find that kind of stuff, but that stuff's not as, accurate to the traditional Italian folk magic. I see we have a super chat here from Howard who says skull. Thank you very much for that. So now there are also a lot of like pairs of kind of divine lovers you'll see in Italian witchcraft too. Let's see, I found Tana and Tanis, Diana and Dianas, Jana and Janus. So I'll need to look into that more on what the concept of why these paired deities. But what I find more interesting is that there are also regional deities. And I have an example here from one of my patrons, Mayo. Thank you so much. She is a practicing Strega, and she let me know about a deity called Angatia, Angitia, who is a goddess from the Abruzzo region of Italy, and she's a snake goddess and a goddess of healing. Now, I found this kind of regional aspect very interesting because I'm a foodie and I own several cookbooks on Italian food and cooking. And Italian food is also very regional. When you go to the different regions in Italy, they have their own specialities, they have their own ways of doing things. Pasta you have in the north of Italy might be very different than pasta you have in the south of Italy and things like that. So I find it cool that there is also a lot of regional variety or variation when it comes to deity work or different deities that the folk magic traditions connect to. So I thought that was really cool. Now, another thing they do with Italian folk magic is honoring the ancestors. Now, this is something that is not just done in Italian witchcraft, but in many different pagan traditions. So that's a very common thing. But it also goes all the way back to ancient Rome, where ancestor veneration was a big part. I'm curious too if there are any Italians watching if they also have kind of the lares concept. So in ancient Rome, you also had your household deities that you would leave little offerings for. And I know household, deities are a big part of English, Northern European paganism, but also Slavic paganism. So you have like the brownie, for example, in English homes, kind of taking care of the homes, or in the Slavic world, you have the domovi, or different spirits that kind of exist within the home and take care of things. I don't know if there's an Italian equivalent to that. I'd love to hear. Let's see. Another super chat here. Thank you very much. With a book recommendation called The Dance of the Dissident Daughter by Sue Monk Kidd. It's about a deconstructed Christian to divine feminist, very pagan femme vibes and very empowering. I'll definitely have to check that one out. Yeah, I'm always up for a good, new pagan book to read. So thank you very much for that recommendation. Let's see. Oh, and I see someone commenting here in Italy, they have what's called the Monticello, which is the spirit of the house. So it does look like they do have their own version of a house spirit. Very cool. And that's something you should incorporate too, regardless of your pagan or witchcraft practice, because the concept of house spirits kind of persists in so many different cultures. Thinking about that, maybe setting up a little place for, your own house spirits, leaving a little offering, a little libation, or some incense from time to time might be a good idea. Okay. Great comments and questions. I see someone asking here about me doing a video on Slavic paganism. I do have an intro on Slavic paganism on my channel, but I definitely plan on doing more videos on Slavic paganism. I just have to learn it all first because I'm still new to that tradition, but super fascinating. Definitely want to do that in the future. So now let's dive into the actual folk magic. That's why you're here, right? And again, thanks to one of my patrons who, gave me some great different folk magic traditions to talk about. So thank you, Mayo. She's on my Discord community. So I'm very much interested in folk magic traditions. So these are not necessarily in the Wiccan tradition. I want to know what the old grandmas are doing in the kitchen. What weird folk traditions, superstitions, weird witchcraft. I am all into that. Folk magic is just kind of a term that refers to the magic of everyday people. They don't necessarily have to be rural, though often it does represent people who live in the country. But they're also meant to be very simple. These are not elaborate, rituals where you need to cast a circle and call in the elements, and do, protection, all of that. Usually these tend to be more like simple and just kind of, easy to do right in like your kitchen or by your hearth. Super easy stuff. So again, keep in mind that in Italian folk magic, a lot of it's intermixed in Catholicism. So I'm not going to dive too much into that today because that's a whole nother topic, and the different saints and the traditions around the different saints. But also keep in mind that these are things that are meant to be simple. Now, one of the rituals that people do, or little spells, is they'll pour oil, so olive oil, into a bowl of water. Now, if the drops clump together of the oil, that means someone has put a curse on you, and you need to stab the drops of oil with scissors or a knife and say scatta to remove the curse. Now, a lot of Italian folk magic is about preventing others from putting a curse on you. And it's especially about the evil eye. The idea that someone could look at you and just from that look be able to impart a curse on you. So you need to do some witchcraft to prevent that curse from reaching you, or to remove any curse that could be upon you. So you'll see a lot of stuff about the evil eye, which I believe is called the malocchio or the maloik. I did find this hilarious bit of stand-up comedy from an Italian comedian about the evil eye. I linked it down below, so watch it after happy hour if you want a good laugh. But there are different things you can do in order to avoid the evil eye. Now, the first thing is the horns, like the rock and roll. I believe this is like something you can do to avoid someone cursing you. But then I also read this is something you can do to curse someone. So someone please give me a bit more context on if this is to prevent the curse or to do the curse on someone else. Let me know. So another thing people do is they have a talisman. And the talisman is usually like this red horn, or it's a red pepper. And that's to protect you from the evil eye. So you can hang that up anywhere in your home. You could have a jewelry item with it. You could have it in your purse, on your keychain. The red horn or pepper was believed to protect you from the evil eye. Now, I think that's kind of interesting too, just from a medical standpoint, because red peppers, when you eat them, they have a lot of good properties for your health and your body. So if you're eating a lot of red peppers, it might prevent colds and sickness. So in that way, it's kind of like preventing a curse. I don't know if there's anything there, but I find that interesting. Let's see. Let me check your comments here. Okay, great. Let's see. I see someone commenting here that the horns are used to dispel any type of misfortune or bad luck, so maybe not just the evil eye. And then I see someone chiming in about southern Spain. They also have the evil eye kind of concept, and then, you know, different tools and folk magic traditions to prevent the evil eye. Great comments. Let's see. I see a comment here. You can use the horns to repel, kind of like how a nun crosses themselves when they see something inappropriate. If you see someone suspect, you gotta, you know, take your horn. You got your horn. So let's see. I see someone chiming in from Uruguay who says the pepper to prevent the evil eye is also popular there. And then I see someone here from Spain saying they use rosemary to prevent the evil eye. Let's see. Oh, I see another comment here that's interesting from Rachel saying that the evil eye has Hebrew origins and that it's the idea that a person or supernatural being can bewitch or harm an individual by merely looking at them. That's super neat. I wonder what the first written account is of the evil eye, or, you know, maybe it's mostly done through the oral tradition and there aren't that many written accounts about it. So yeah, really interesting stuff. Thank you for sharing your insight and your opinions about this too, because it's always great to have firsthand knowledge from you guys. So let's see. And then I see someone chiming in about the evil eye is also in Hungarian folk witchcraft. And then it says it gives the person or the person's livestock an illness. Very interesting indeed. So the evil eye is a concept that has traveled quite a bit. So we've seen here, obviously Italy, but it looks like Spain. It looks like it might have traveled, you know, as far east as Hungary. So yeah, there's like great comments there. Thank you for sharing that. And then also, you know, kitchen witchery or kitchen witchcraft is a big part of Italian folk magic as well. Like with the olive oil and the water, a lot of folk traditions involve the kitchen and cooking and stuff like that. Now, the tricky thing, because Italian folk magic is often passed down, you know, from, you know, grandmother to mother to daughter, sometimes maybe from, you know, the father's side, but you know, it's going to be different. It's going to be varied. So the evil eye seems to be pretty persistent in Italian folk tradition, but other, you know, specific spells, you know, those might vary based on, you know, what has been passed down within your family. Another thing that I think is an interesting question is, where do you draw the line between superstition and witchcraft? Because a lot of people would say that these evil eye traditions are superstitions. And then a lot of people would say they're folk magic. And then where do you draw that line between superstition and folk magic? Are all superstitions basically a form of witchcraft? Or are superstitions something different than witchcraft? I don't have an answer there, but I think that's an interesting question. Is there a line to begin with between superstition and witchcraft? Is that individual's choice on, you know, what folk magic traditions they view as silly and superstitious and which ones they choose to practice? Or is that part of our kind of modern brainwashing to immediately assume something is a superstition and thus invalid? It's hard to say, it's hard to know, but you know, I'd like to hear from you guys. When you guys, if you do use like the horn to prevent the evil eye, would you consider that a superstition or a piece of witchcraft? And, you know, what are the societal connotations of referring to it as such? I kind of feel like when people hear the word superstition, they think it's, you know, dumb or lowbrow. So, you know, is that something that's changing? You know, are these superstitions starting to become more valued as these folk magic practices also start to become more popularized and established among communities? So yeah, I think it's interesting. I have a great comment here from an Italian saying that Italians don't really like the word witch or strega, as it's got a negative connotation. So they won't really call it witchcraft. It's always just part of their worldview. I like that. It's just kind of part of the culture. These folk traditions, you might not even call it folk witchcraft, just these folk traditions is just part of the culture. And there doesn't even necessarily need to be a spiritual or religious component to it. It's part of maybe just the cultural identity of Italy. It kind of makes me think of, you know, it makes me think of like Japan in a way with like Shinto, where the majority of the population is not necessarily religious or even spiritual or would consider or call themselves Shinto, yet they still do the traditions, go to the temples on the specific days, you know, and perform the specific rituals because it's part of Japanese culture. So with being an Italian, it's like, you know, you wouldn't necessarily have to even believe in the effectiveness of these folk traditions, but you might do them anyway because it's just part of what it means to be Italian. So I think that's interesting. You know, how do we define culture? You know, it doesn't necessarily mean you have to believe in something. You can do it. And the doing is more important than the belief, which is something I think is very unique about paganism and something that really differentiates it from Christianity or any of the other main monotheistic religions of the world. Because when you look at something like Christianity, your belief, your faith is what's most important. Your actions, sure, they might be sinful, but they can be forgiven. It's really your faith that's important. At least in my perspective, when I think about paganism and the ancient pagan cultures, it wasn't about your faith in the gods that was most important. It was your actions. What you did in life that was something that was honorable or would be considered honorable by the gods. Your actions were more important than your faith. Your faith, sure, if you have it, great. If you don't, that's fine too. Which I think when we think about modern paganism, that gets really interesting because now you can have this huge spectrum when it comes to deity. You can have even maybe atheist pagans, and then you can have hardcore polytheists. And both sides might be able to consider themselves pagan because we don't, you know, put as much value on the concept of faith. It's more important to act honorably. Your actions are what count here, now, in life. The afterlife isn't as important, and your faith isn't as important. It's what you do now for yourself, for your community. That's what matters. So anyway, that's my own 2 cents about some of the differences between paganism and Christianity. But Let me check your thoughts here. Let's see. And then I see someone commenting here about the use of the word Strega, and how in Spanish culture they have the word bruja. Or is it bruja? Is it bruja or bruja? I don't know any Spanish, unfortunately. Which is also the term for witch. And that's been very much a term that's also been reclaimed by immigrants here in America. I wonder if that's also true in Spain or in Spanish-speaking cultures in Central and South America. If that term has any derogatory connotation, or if it's likewise been reclaimed. Oh, I see someone helping me here. Bruja. Bruja is the correct pronunciation. You know me, I suck at this, guys. I try. But language is not my strong suit. Let's see, great comments. Oh, I see we have another super chat here mentioning liberal Quakerism, which is all about focusing on social justice through non-violence. Yeah, you know, that's a good point. That's also a tradition that focuses more on the actions, or in this case, focuses on the importance of non-violence as being the quintessential feature of that faith. Yeah, that's an interesting point. Yeah, so let's see, we have about 9 more minutes. I'm almost done with my wine. So if you have any questions or comments that you want to share, now is the time to do so. And I'll check your comments here. If you enjoyed this, enjoyed this little intro into Italian witchcraft and folk magic, of course, you know, the best way is to become a patron, or, you know, send me a super chat right now so I can answer your question. Also, if you're into tarot, I mean, I did make a tarot deck. This thing took me 2 years to create, so if you're into tarot, you know, check out that link down below in my description, because I am a tarot buff as well. Here's what it looks like. It's very nice and shiny and gold. So yeah, it's for all the tarot buffs out there. Also, I'd love to know from you guys as well. I've been doing, you know, I do Pagan Happy Hour, of course, at 5 p.m. I've been doing Tarot Tuesdays on Instagram at 2 p.m. where I do free tarot workshops. And I've been wondering if I should start another YouTube channel, and just for my Tarot Tuesdays live, where I answer all your tarot questions, any divination questions. Do you think that's a good idea? I know not all of you are into tarot or into divination. It's just another one of my passions. But I'd love to hear your thoughts on that, because I might start that soon. With my friend Jamie, we both co-created the deck. It was a huge process, but really wonderful, really fun. So yeah, so I might transfer my Tarot Tuesday from Instagram to a new YouTube channel so I can help teach you guys tarot if that's something you're into. Let's see, also be sure to check out the links down below if you are interested in learning more about witchcraft. I linked my witchcraft playlist. I probably have like 20 to 30 videos on there about various witchcraft traditions and practices. Definitely check out that funny stand-up comedian link that I have down below that's about the evil eye. I just find him very funny. I also have a couple book resources that I linked down below as well. And of course, my Patreon link is down there too. So, you know, I'd love to hear from you guys as well. If you have any suggestions on future Pagan Happy Hours. I tentatively planned them ahead of time, so I was thinking about doing hexing and cursing next week. But I'm open to suggestions. So of course, let me know. I want to create content that you guys want to hear about. And I am currently working on my next video for my channel, which is going to be Witchcraft Through the Ages, the 80s. So I did Witchcraft Through the Ages, the 90s, several weeks ago. So I am doing the research right now on the witchcraft movement of the 80s. So keep an eye out for that video. It'll probably drop sometime next week. And I just did a video essay on the Druids. I put that out yesterday. So if you are interested in Celtic paganism or Druids or Druidry, definitely check that one out because I dive all into the Druids, who they are, you know, what it means to be a Druid in modern day life. So definitely check that out if that's something you are into. I see we have a super chat here from Jezebeth. Thank you so much for supporting the show today. Let's see. So, oh, I see another comment here from Jezebeth asking about pagan veiling. So this is a fairly new trend that I've learned about. So some people are wearing head coverings or veils as pagans. Now this is something that was traditionally done, especially in the Greco-Roman pagan culture. Not all forms of paganism. So obviously I don't veil, but I know some people are into it. And if you're into it, you know, I say go for it. I mean, there's no rules here. That's why we're here. I mean, I imagine many of us found paganism because we were sick and tired of other people telling us what to believe, and we wanted to do our own research. So let's see, just checking your comments here. Oh, I see someone requesting ancient Egyptian magic for a future pagan happy hour topic. Yes, that sounds super fun. As you can see, I got a few books over there on ancient Egypt, and I did actually study Egyptian hieroglyphs in college because I love to major in topics that will never be useful or ever be economically viable. So I can read and write Middle Egyptian. So I know a lot about Egyptian magic, and I have not yet done a pagan happy hour on it. So that could be very fun. Let's see. I see another suggestion here from Mark for a future video or pagan happy hour on how to revolutionize paganism, how to make it climate change relevant, how to make it a method of change. Great comment. You know, I'm starting small with my little balcony garden, but you know what? Not just that. I bought a tiny little compost bin. I bought some, well, I haven't bought them yet. I'm going to buy some worms. This is called worm composting. This is something people do who live in apartments, but I'm going to put my compost bin out on my balcony. I'm going to buy my little worms to eat up all my food scraps. So I'm trying to do my best here, but there's so much more that could be done. And I think there's a huge potential here for us pagans to come together to see what we can do for the environment, to plant some trees, to be advocates for the environment, for our Mother Earth, for Gaia, whatever it might be. I think that would be really fun. Unfortunately, us pagans don't tend to be super good about organizing and getting together, so we got to get better on that first. But let's see, let me check your comments here. Let's see, someone's asking if I have a video on Book of Shadows. I have a video I did about a month ago on Book of Shadows versus Grimoire, what the differences and similarities between the two are, so you can check that out if you're interested. Let's see. I see someone requesting Finnish folklore and paganism. Definitely want to get to that. I see a few of you also voting for Cometicism or ancient Egyptian magic. Yes, definitely going to do that. Let's see, great comments and great suggestions. Let's see. Oh gosh, they're moving too quick. Can't read it. Let's see, awesome. Well, I should probably sign off. I'm going to see a movie in a theater for the first time since, you know, this past several year and a half at this point, I feel like. Since everything's shut down. I've finally been vaccinated, so I'm gonna go see a movie for the first time. I'm seeing Demon Slayer Mugen Train for any other weebs out there who might be watching. I'm very excited about it. It's my favorite anime of the moment. So I'm gonna go do that. I'm gonna finish my Chianti. And thank you all for watching. Thank you all for supporting Pagan Happy Hour. And I'll see you next week. Bye.